Hi, my name is Tim Lindquist. I'm a faculty member in the software engineering program at ASU. This is a video supporting SER423, our class on mobile app development, mobile systems. This video is about iOS and doing navigation in an iOS app. So we're going to take a look at some of the techniques for doing that. And I want to point out to you some of the reading resources. If you look on the web page and in the Blackboard site, you'll see that there are three different links to different readings. The first link, Build a Basic UI, is actually a link that shows you how to use the interface developer in order to develop simple controls within a user interface. And the second one looks at view controllers in more detail, the relationship between the view and the controller. In iOS it's called a view controller, but the relationship between them. And then there's a last one, Ray Winderlich's tutorial on using iOS's storyboard. Storyboarding is a great facility that's available through the interface builder in Xcode that provides you with the ability to sketch the flow of navigation in an iOS app, make connections between different scenes, and build an app up from a visual perspective, I guess is the right way to put it. In addition to those readings, there are also samples that are available, and we're actually going to take a look at one of those, well actually two of them. The first one deals primarily with Swift. It's Student Jason's Swift Playground. So it kind of shows you some of the details of the Swift programming language. It gives you an example of a student class, shows how to convert things to and from JSON to create objects, to initialize an object of a class. The other one has to do with tab views, and then the third one with navigation. And in order to better understand those, let's actually go ahead and take a look at the simulator. So what I have brought up here is the student navigation one, which is the navigation controller. And it's very common in iOS for there to be a table view. The navigation controller is actually the top part of the screen here that allows you to control how you're going to navigate through the app. In this particular case, on this scene, it's a table view, so it is in this case a very simple table in that each table has only one column, so that you see in this case 4 different rows with a title and then subtitle information for it. But the table view in general is a very flexible control. We're able to have literally a table with images as well as text and other things within any given row in the table. What you place in a row can be completely controlled by the program, so you can have all kinds of different forms for a table view. But in this particular case, the table selection, the user selects one of the rows in the table and it takes them to another view, which shows a detail on that particular selection, row selection. So with respect to the storyboard for it, for this particular app, let's see if we can take a look at the storyboard and bring it to a resolution that you can see. So you can see that the launch scene for it is actually the navigation controller. Launch is depicted by the arrow on the left-hand side of one of the scenes. The navigation controller itself doesn't have anything that shows up in the view aside from the bar across the top. And then to its right is the table view. The table view by selection, one of the elements being selected in the table view, takes us by means of this thing called a segue to a detailed scene that provides information about whatever has been selected in the table view. Very common kind of a paradigm or an idiom, I guess, or maybe the right way to term it, for mobile app development. So we want to take a look at the creation of this, and we'll do it from the perspective of a single view app, and then build the navigation controller on top of it. Pardon me. That's one of the navigation mechanisms we'll look at. Is the navigation controller. We also want to look at the other one as well. which is tabs. And let's go back to here and open up a different one, open up the other example. So this is simple tab view. And in this particular case, we have storyboard, which has, we'll see again, 3 different scenes. One of those scenes is the tab view controller. So in iOS, tabs are across the bottom of the screen. Navigation is across the top. That's a little different than what we see in Android. In Android, both are across the top. And we call them an action bar, which corresponds to the navigation controller. Action bar in Android is the navigation controller in iOS. And the tab bar is also across the top in Android, where in iOS it's the tab var view, which is across the bottom. So here we can see 2 different scenes that are, the movement between those scenes is controlled by selecting one of the tabs. Not obviously, you can have several different tabs across the bottom of them. That tab bar controller makes sure the tabs show up in all of the different scenes or views. And let's just take a look at this one in execution as well. So you can see the difference, and then we'll go back and actually try to build them or show you building them. So in this particular case, the tab is across the bottom, and I've got a place tab and a route tab. Really the only differences between the 2 corresponding scenes in this example is information that's passed between one to the other. So right now we're in the route view, route view, and then this is the place view. So depending upon the tab, we can actually go to different table views or whatever we want. And of course we can have any number of tabs that we want. So let's take a look. What we want to do in this video is to show how to build an app with one or both of these controllers. So let's do that. Let's start. We'll just build a very simple app. So we'll do a new project. We'll build it on a single view application. There are other choices. You can see if it's going to be a tabbed application, we can actually begin with that. Master detail application and so forth. We're not going to do that. Those actually do provide exactly what we want, but I want you to see how part of the goal is to do understand using storyboarding and being able to build things from the ground up, allowing us to be able to mix things, different controllers together. So I'm going to call this one Delete Me, so that I don't forget to delete it after we're done. We're going to use the programming language Swift, universal devices, and then we're not going to use core data in this one, but it's okay to include tests. And I'm going to put it in that folder. So we end up with a single view application. So if we go to the storyboard, we see that we have just one view controller. And let me get rid of some of the other things so you can see what we have here. We have a single view controller. That single view controller is the launch view. So let's go ahead and build a simple navigation app in which we'll have a tab view, a table view, and that table view will provide us a list of things from which the user may select. And then when the user selects one, it will go to this view controller to provide more detail of that particular view. So how do we do that within the storyboard or within the interface builder? Same thing. A couple different ways. We'll use this simple one, which is to bring out a navigation controller. So if we select navigation controller, drag it out onto the storyboard, you see all of a sudden we end up with not only a navigation controller, but with a table view scene as well, in addition to our original view controller. All right, well, we want to change and make our navigation controller the launch scene. So we'll drag the arrow over there. And then we're going to end up creating a table. Remember, our goal is to do something similar to what's shown for the student. Make it a little bit simpler than what that one is. So let's look at setting up the table view. So a table has a prototype cell. And what we're going to do is use one of the predefined mechanisms for the prototype cell. Notice that we can also take a look at a hierarchical view here. So we now have a root view controller. We have our original view controller, which is the one that's out of the, oh no, it's actually right here. We have the navigation controller and then a root view controller. The root view controller has a table view, and it has a table view cell. So the first thing we want to do is select that table view cell, and we're going to change the style of it. So if we have it as a custom style, then this table view is a view, meaning that we can put any view in there we want. It can be a nested view that has other views within it, which allows us the ability to put images and other things into a given row or a given row of a table. But we're not going to do that. Instead of custom, we'll just use the subtitle, which is what's shown in the example. And notice that when I select subtitle, all of a sudden now my prototype cell has a title field and a subtitle field. Those are both labels that are provided for me. So if I were to pick something different, left detail, all right, as opposed to right detail. All right, so that allows me to separate information on both sides of the row, and then basic. All right, basic is just a title. So we're going to pick the subtitle. Allows us to put two pieces of information in each row that we're going to have in it. So now we have the view. Before we go any further, let's actually make a connection. So we want to make sure that when the user selects one of the rows in the table, that it will transition us to the original view controller. So in order to do that, we select it and then depress the control key, hold it down, click and drag to the, and I've got the wrong one, I've got to go to the table view cell. Select the table view cell, and now depress and hold control, and then, and then drag. And you can see the detailed view controller shows up. So now I let up with the drag, and this is creating a segue. So there's different choices of what kind of segue, depending upon whether we want to come back, whether we want it to be a modal segue, meaning that we're not going to be able to do anything until we finish up that segue and declare it finished. But we'll just do as the simplest, which is a show segue. And the segue shows up in our storyboard as a connection between the root view controller and our view controller scene. When I select the segue, you can see that its properties get shown in the right-hand side in the attributes inspector. And we're going to identify this. This is going to be a very simple pet thing. So we'll call it as a pet cell. I'm sorry, pet segue, or pet detail, meaning that when we transition this segue, we want to go from the title of the pet to more information about the pet. So we've given the segue a name. Let's go ahead now, and we don't have any code. All right, the only classes that we have is the controller class for the detailed, because that's we started out with a single view. So we're going to have to add one more class to take care of our table view. So we do that several different ways to do it, but I like to do it by selecting the project itself, right-click on it, and select New File. We're going to do a Cocoa Touch class. It could be just a Swift file if we wanted to, but if we do a Cocoa Touch class, we can decide what its base class is. So you can see it's already set up to be a subclass of the UI table view controller. Here we can actually pick any of the Cocoa classes. So we're going to pick table view controller, and I'm just going to call it pet table view controller. And we don't want an XIB file. That is the storyboard file. We've already got one of those. We're going to do that hookup here in just a minute. So next, and it goes in the project. And now you see I have a pet table view controller. By doing it as a COCO class, you can see I end up extending that table view controller, and it provides for me the functions that I may want to override. It gives me the ones that I have to override, and then by comment it gives me the other ones that I may want to override. We're actually going to do at least one of those as well. But let's go ahead and set up a very simple model in this thing, and let's do it this way. We'll introduce a little bit of Swift in order to do it. We'll call it a variable pets, whose type will be explicit with a type. It's going to be an array, and the elements in the array are going to be what are called tuples. If you're familiar with Python, you probably have been exposed to tuples. So tuples are a grouping. It's a way of grouping information together and structuring it. And we're going to do the tuples in the following way. We'll have name, which is one of the components of the tuple, and it will be a string. And then we'll also have a type. So the name will be the name of the pet, and then the type, it'll be another string, which is it a dog, is it a cat, whatever. And that gives us the type for our pets array. And now let's give it a static value. So we'll do a literal array. And in order to do that, we can specify a couple of tuples. I don't know whether I have to give the name and type in here. Let's try it without it and see what it does. So let's do Sandy. And so far so good. And Minnie my cat. Okay, so if it doesn't complain, we're good to go. So now we can refer to elements out of my array of pets. So I'd say pets of 0 would refer to Sandy, the tuple, Sandy a poodle, and pets of 1 would be Minnie my cat. And I can access the information that's in them. I can add new stuff to it and so forth, but we'll just be static with it. What we want to do is provide this as a data source for what's going to show up in our table. So we'll just have 2 rows in the table, one for Sandy, one for Minnie. And if we go down and look at the data source methods for my table view, you'll see that one of the data source methods that we have to provide is number of sections. So sections are essentially columns. And I want to have more than 0 columns, obviously, but I'm only going to have 1 column in each row. So I'm going to change that to a 1. It'll return a 1. So if I wanted to have 3 columns, then I'd return 3. And then a number of rows in a given section. So how many rows are there in a section? In fact, we're going to have pets.count, right, which is going to count up the total number of pets. And I described sections wrong. Sections are sections of my table, which allows me to not divide it up as columns, but divide it up as sections of rows. Okay, so doing that leaves us with, in this case, 2 different rows in only a single section. And we do need to do one more of these methods, and that will be this. We'll do this method here that will provide data for a given row. In order to use that, this is a function table view, cell for row at index path, and it asks us to provide the code to specify a cell and to return that code. So let's get rid of the comments here to make it a real method. And cell reuse identifier. So this provides the ability for when we have a table view that scrolls, for the views within that table to be reused. So it doesn't have to go through the process of rebuilding everything that has to do with creating a table view component. So you can view it as that, or you can view it, you can consider it that there is a pool of views. Those views may get reused. So if at one point in time the screen is showing 4 different rows, there may be 4 of these view cells that are available. And if at another point in time there's only 1 showing, those other 2 may be sitting in a pool someplace waiting to be reused. Or it may be that there isn't any and it has to create one for us, and it will actually, by this deck reusable cell, DQ a reusable cell, it will create a new one for us if it needs to. So configure the cell, we're going to do that by actually putting information in it. And we'll just kind of do it the easy way here. If I go to student navigation example, I'll show you the code for that one. If we pick the student table view controller, we'll go to the same method, and you can see the an example of the code that sets up the title and the subtitle. If I can find the right method. There it is right there, almost even selected for me. Let's just kind of pull that out, copy and paste it, and then we'll edit it to make it work right. This isn't a student, this is a pet. And it's pets at indexPath.row. And we don't have to cast it to anything. We will actually, let's declare it a pet as a tuple of name colon string comma type colon string, all right, which is our tuple. So now the text, the label for the row, its text property will be, actually I can keep the name there, a pet.name. And then the detail text part will be, we don't need a constructor for the string because the type is actually a pet.type is also a string. All right, so we ended up with a blank view in our root view controller. And the reason for that is that we haven't made a hookup between the controller and the view itself. So we're going to go back in and do that. In order to do that, within the storyboard, we will select our root view controller. And then in the attributes inspector, actually it's not in the attributes inspector, it's in the identity inspector. We see the class, and instead of UI table view controller class, it really should be our pet table view controller class, which says that now from the view for our root view controller, it is the view part, the model that goes along with it, is the the pet table view controller. So in fact, it'll look to that pet table view controller to be the data source for putting information into the table view. So now if we start it up again, I'm assuming that we're going to see our pets, and let's see if I can boost this up a little bit so you can see it. There is Sandy a poodle and Minnie my cat. All right, so I did actually do the connection to the detailed view controller, but I haven't actually put anything in that detailed view controller. Okay, so now in order to do that, what we would do is let's go back to the code, and I'll just sketch it for you. Then I want to, instead of doing that, you can pick that up from the example that's on the web page and on the Blackboard site, but I want to show you how to put all of this into a tab as well if you wanted to do that. So let's go back to our pet table view controller. In that code, in the commented code, usually it's at the very bottom, we have override function prepare for Segue. Since we have a Segue defined in our storyboard that takes us from our root view controller, that's this Segue here, to the detailed view whenever the user selects one of the table rows, that'll take us to that view controller. Before it changes the scene, or before it being this iOS, before the scene is changed to the view controller, it will call the method, if I override it, prepare for Segue. And if we go back and take a look at the student example that's on the web page, I can show you in that where open recent, student navigation. So in this project, we can see in the student table view controller, it's at the bottom, prepare for Segue. And what we do is get a look for the identifier of the Segue that we're traversing. We named it, I think we called it pet detail when we created the storyboard Segue. And then we get its view controller, and then if we want, we can set one of the properties in the view controller. In this case, we'd want to set a property that said, here's the pet that has been selected, show me the detail about this particular pet. In this particular example, we say which student has been selected. So remember, in this case, there are 3 or 4 different students. When we select one of the students, this method gets called before we go to the detailed view for that student and pass to it the information by setting one of its properties. An interesting difference between Android and iOS in this particular case. In Android, we've done that with intents and adding to the intent, as if it were a dictionary, a key and a value. The values that we can add to intents in Android are limited to either being primitive values or to being serializable, Java serializable. When we use this approach, we actually have direct access to the view controller and its properties, so those restrictions don't apply. We can have a reference type, any reference type that we want to add as a value, a property, give it a value, or a value type as well. Doesn't really matter. So an object of a class is just fine. It could be a complex class. It could be any number of different things. Any value that we can manipulate within the Swift program, we can pass to another view controller by means of this method, prepare for Segue. All right, so now let's take a look at the last thing we want to do in this video is let's suppose that what we want to do is to put all of this into a tab view. All right, so overarching will be a tab that'll allow us to either view pets or maybe we want to have another detail view or something else. Let's just make it as simple as we can. What we'll do is add another view controller here. So let's bring out a view controller. Let's just say it's going to be a detailed view. And I'm going to end up with problems with having space and still keeping it big enough so that you can see it. But nevertheless, we'll see what we can do here. What we want to do is add so the other navigation type that we're going to look at, there's other ones, but the two are navigation controller and a tab controller. We want to take and put this new view controller that we've added as one tab in our application, and then have our navigation controller be the other one. So let's bring this guy out here. And what we're going to do is select, multiply select, in order to create a tab view that has both of these. So the idea is, at the bottom of the screen, I'm going to have tabs. In this case, just 2 tabs. One tab for the new view controller that I just added, and the other tab for my navigation controller, which shows all of my pets. In order to do that, I can doubly select. I want to select my first one will be the view controller I just brought out, and the second one I select will be my navigation controller. With both of them selected, so I select both of them by holding down the shift, by selecting first the view controller, holding the shift, and then selecting the navigation controller. And now if I go up under the editor and embed in, I want to embed them in a tab bar controller. So it will create for me a tab bar controller where one of the tabs will go to my navigation controller and the other tab will go to my view controller. So I can place icons in these so now when the user selects one tab or the other tab, they're either going to be taken to my navigation controller, which will take me to my table view, or if they select the other tab, they will go to the view controller that I just brought out. There's no reason why this couldn't be a different table view. So for example, in the laboratory exercises suggest that in addition to wanting to be able to view and manipulate places, geographic places, you may also want to be able to build and navigate and view and browse routes, right? A route where a route is I'm going to go from place A to place B to place C. So you may actually want to have one tab that is for browsing all of the places and another tab that is for browsing all of the routes that you have within the system. Okay, so that shows you how the other application that I've also closed it up. That is the shared data tab views. So that application, that example shows you tab views and how to pass data between different tab views. And the way that one of the ways that you can pass data between different tabs that need to share data is by creating a superclass of the tab bar view controller, and that's what this guy is. So you see that it is my tab bar view controller, UI tab bar controller, and it contains the information that may be shared between each of the different tabs, so that within those tabs they can go back and get their parent view controller and pick up the properties from those. In this case, Jim is one of the properties of both of those tabs. So another way of sharing so we looked at two ways of sharing today. Actually, one of them is by Segue, prepare for Segue, passing information that way. And then the other way is by creating a extended class of the tab bar controller to allow us to share properties between all of the tabs or all of the views or view controllers, more appropriately, that are under the same tab bar controller. All right, so let's leave it at that for this section. I want to go back and just point out there are three different samples. I've actually looked at two of those today, the student navigation and the shared data tab views. The third one shows some more Swift and using JSON, the JavaScript object notation, in a Swift playground. In order to get these to work, download them from the website or from the Blackboard site. And then they're jar files, which stands for Java Archive. Java Archive is the same format as zip, compression format as zip. And you simply extract those and then you'll be able to open up the projects, in this case using Xcode, after they get extracted. All right, let's leave it at that for this session. Thank you.